is actually one of the easiest areas, and we're going to go over it in more detail, but strict liability is intention is not necessary. Strict liability is the sheer fact of the existence is enough to pin the damages on an individual. And strict liability will come up, and we'll see when it arises, but many states' dangerous animals rise to the level of strict liability. So if you know you have a dangerous animal and you still let it run free to where it can possibly hurt someone, and that animal does hurt someone, particularly if it's a tiger or something bizarre, then that person the owner is going to be strictly liable for the damages in many states. So strict liability is less about intent and more about the sheer circumstances that exist. Now we're going to, in this class, talk a lot about reasonableness. What is reasonable? What is reasonable conduct? What is reasonable action? And I'll mention different definitions for reasonable, but reasonable is a difficult term to pin down when it comes to personal injury, when it comes to tort law. Why? Well, because reasonable depends on the fact finder, on the jury. If I were to say what a reasonable person would do, you might scratch your head and go, well, that's a pretty ambiguous definition. Who's reasonable in their action? You're walking along someone's property line and they fail to pick up some nails after doing some fence work. You step on one of these nails and injure your foot. Was it reasonable for the person who repaired that fence, who owns the property, to leave nails on the ground? Nails that you step on? That's a good question. Was it reasonable? I mean, the person's obviously injured, the person walking along, but was it reasonable for that fence repairer, the owner of the property, to leave the nails on the ground? We don't know, but the fact finder knows. A reasonable person is what a jury or fact finder says that person is. Depends on the jury. You get a number of jurors thinking it is reasonable for the nails to be left on the ground, then as the defendant you're out of luck. If you get a number of jurors that decide it isn't reasonable to leave those nails on the ground, then the plaintiff wins. Reasonable is an amorphous term in tort law, and we're going to hear it a lot. It's a wait and see. You'll know what it is, but ultimately it will be left to the fact finder, either the jury or the judge, if there is no jury. And at that point, you'll know. A term you're going to hear a lot is public policy. When a jury makes a decision, when a fact finder makes a decision, even when a judge makes a decision on the law, the concepts revolve around public policy. What is good public policy? What is fair? What is just? What is equitable? Those are the main concepts that follow public policy. Going back to the person who gets steps on nails because nails were left on the property line. Well, is it good public policy to allow people to throw nails on the ground, to leave nails on the ground, and to have another person walk on them when it's likely that another person would walk on them? On the other hand, is it good public policy to say that an individual can walk along the property line and not pay attention to where they're walking? If there are visible nails on the ground, shouldn't one have the responsibility to know where they're walking? I mean, what if there was a hole there, or a bear trap, or something that could have easily been seen, but the person isn't paying attention to where they're walking? So how much liability or fault do we want to put on the person creating the dangerous situation? How much fault do we want to put on the person who is entering into the dangerous situation? The answer is public policy. The answer is how individuals see how people want to act. Do we want to put the blame more on the person who's creating the situation or the person who's just walking through the situation? So you hear the word public policy a lot. You hear good public policy or bad public policy. And it's really, it's like the term activist judges. It's really whichever side you believe, whether or not you think a judge is activist. If they're agreeing with your point of view, then they're obviously not activists. But if they are not agreeing with your point of view, then they are activists. Well, the same thing with public policy. One can say that a decision is bad public policy if it disagrees with what your beliefs are, and one could say that a decision is good public policy if they disagree, or if you agree with what the decision was. When it comes to torts, personal injury, in common law states, and I'll get to that actually right now, I'll discuss it. Every state except for Louisiana falls under common law jurisdiction. And what that means is that the laws, when it comes to torts, have a history through case law and through statutory law. Case law and statutory law. And it derives itself from English common law. So